Thank you for coming. My name is Grace Van Mill, and I'd like to welcome you tonight on behalf of MCIC, the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation. And we're happy to be back with you for another Local Brews and Global Views discussion night. So as we begin, I want to acknowledge that for those of us joining from Winnipeg, that the land where we are tonight is the traditional territory of many Indigenous communities, including the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and we're on the homeland of the Métis Nation, of course, in Treaty 1 territory. And we're grateful for the chance to host this event, and we want to thank you for joining. So a quick refresher for those who may not have joined us online before, we're doing this webinar style, so you'll be able to see the speakers, but not other participants. We do have a Q&A section set up, so feel free to upload your questions to that. If we could just go to the next slide. You can see it here on the screen, and I will share them with Tyler at the very end. That'll be coming up soon on the screen there. So we're also going to be launching periodic polls asking questions of you so that we can hear from you during the presentation. So let's launch the first one and see. So you should see a box pop up on your screen in just 1 second. And this is kind of a fun quiz just to give you a taste for what it might be like to have the quizzes pop up. So you should be seeing that poll on your screen, figuring out if Winnipeg were a breed of dog, which breed would it be? So I'm interested to see your results in this. I do like to have a little bit of fun at the beginning. So I'll just give you a few seconds to fill that out. Just as you're filling that out, I just wanted to mention that we are recording this tonight, but of course you don't need to worry about being on the recording. We'll give you lots of chances to speak to us in the chat and in the Q&A. So I see most people have answered, so let me share the results. So a lot of you seem to think that Winnipeg is like a St. Bernard, always helping others and ready with a drink. Well, I wondered what you'd pick. That was a top contender for me. So thanks for that. So that's how the polls work. And it's hard to believe, but this event is already the 11th in a series of coffee nights about global issues. We've talked about everything from innovation and aid to more recently community seed banks, conservation and community health, and so much more. You know, we often host events like this, so please do sign up for our e-newsletter if you'd like to hear more about future events, or you can follow us on social media. I'll just put the link in the chat and it will go out by email later if you wanted to sign up. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, we're on them all. So for those of you who might be less familiar with MCIC, the Manitoba Council, we're a council of about 40 organizations working in international development around the world. We also work to connect with Manitobans on global issues, such as the work you're going to hear about tonight. And this event is sponsored in part by funding from Global Affairs Canada, and we're very thankful for their support. So I'll just launch this next question. I'm curious where you're joining from tonight. So let me start that. I know that as we have these online sessions, there's lots more opportunity for people to join from all different places. So we're always curious to find out who's joining from where. A couple times now we've had people from outside Canada, so we're going global with these events. Okay, let me just share the results here. So it looks like most of you are joining from Winnipeg, about 61%, with 6% of you from the rest of Manitoba, 28% from another province, so we're very spread out tonight, and 6% from outside Canada, so one person joining from outside Canada, I think right now, at least in the poll results, so thanks for that. What I'd like to do next is introduce our speaker tonight. Tyler, if you want to turn your video on at some point. So Tyler Braun has been a program manager at the Canadian Lutheran World Relief for over 3 years. And he's worked in a variety of community and international development roles over the last 10 years. Much of Tyler's work has focused on creative approaches to education. So this work's included a range of contexts, from working as an education advisor in Lao PDR, supporting smallholder farmers to better understand and act on their land rights, to working with university students in Canada who struggle with traditional approaches to learning. Tyler also has degrees in communications and human rights from McGill and Carleton universities. So I know we're all looking forward to hearing more about these projects supporting schools in Jordan and how these student-led initiatives are changing education there. So Tyler, if you want to turn on your video, we're just going to welcome you by putting a plus sign in the chat as applause. That's how we're going to do it online tonight. So put a plus sign in the chat to welcome Tyler. And Tyler, I'll turn it over to you.
There we go. Hello. Grace, is my video on?
Yeah, hi Tyler,
Okay.
We can hear you. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm not
great.
sure what
Sorry.
happened there, but I got you all set up. Good to
Okay,
go.
fantastic. Okay, so hi everybody. So as Grace said, I want to talk to you about a project that I've been managing for about the last 3 years now. What I'm going to do is share a number of examples from this project, but my hope with this presentation is that I'm able to share a bit, I guess, of the journey we've had with this project, including some of the hiccups we had and some of the key learnings. This project just ended in March, actually. So personally, I'm still trying to work out a little bit of what happened. Sorry, I'm just being told to angle my computer down so my light is not facing you all. Hopefully that's better. And some insights into sort of what the project did well. So ILEC, the Improved Learning Environments for Children project, is a 4-year project that was focused on improving the learning environments and outcomes for over 40,000 students and teachers in 75 schools in Amman, Irbid, Zarqa governorates of Jordan. So governorates are basically like provinces. This project was funded by Global Affairs Canada, Manitoba Council for International Cooperation, Canadian Lutheran World Relief, who I work for, and it was a very collaborative project. It was implemented by CLWR, Lutheran World Federation Jordan, Global Affairs Canada, and the Ministry of Education in Jordan. So before I move on, I want to ask you all a poll question here. See here. Oh, that was this one. When you were in elementary or high school, did you ever skip school? Sometimes, no, never, and law. It looks like we're sort of tied between sometimes and no, never. All right. So in the project that I'm working in this project, a lot of kids were skipping school. And we had 2 sort of prongs of the project to try to address this issue. The first is improved physical environments. In Jordan, public schools are often overcrowded. Part of this is, sorry, I keep getting messages. Part of this is because Jordan is one of the highest recipients of Syrian refugees. There's also not large budgets within these schools. There's lots of vandalism. So if something gets broken, if a sink gets broken in a washroom, if lights stop working, if there's graffiti on the walls, there's a better chance that it won't get repaired. And a school in disrepair is not really a great environment for kids to go to. And this was evident in a lot of the information we collected from the schools. When we did our first assessments, around 10% of both Jordanian boys and girls were regularly skipping school a month. For Syrian students, who was also a group that we were working with in these schools, it was even higher. 17% of boys regularly were skipping schools each month, and 10% of girls. Schools were also reporting that, on average, about 5% of their students dropped out of school each year. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. One of them was students didn't particularly want to be in a school that was just falling apart around them. It's not that exciting. Um, and also, there's also some very practical reasons. Girls during menstruation, if your washroom is in such disrepair that you can't enter it, then you can't be in school. One more statistic, related to that. When we first went into the schools, only 49% of female staff and 22% of female students, 22%, so less than a quarter, said that the washrooms met their needs, that they were appropriate for them. Over the course of 4 years, we've seen some incredible changes in these schools, though. Absenteeism has dropped to about 3% for Jordanian boys and girls. Slightly higher for Syrian girls and boys, around 7%, but that's about a 50% drop, or even more for boys, than when we started. Dropout rates are also down to 1% for all the groups except for Syrian boys again, which is around a little higher, 2.5. And one of the biggest and most exciting, I think, indicators that this project was successful is 80% of girls and 75% of female staff said that the washrooms now meet their needs, that they feel comfortable using them in their schools. So I'm going to show you a couple photos. These are photos of before and after some of the rehabilitation work we did in these schools. We did all sorts of work. We worked in washrooms, we worked in hallways, we worked outside of schools, we worked in classrooms to make them more inviting. In washrooms in particular, we ensured that every school had a separate bathroom for girls and boys. For many girls in particular, it could be pretty uncomfortable if they have to share with boys if there's just nothing available. A lot of these bathroom stalls, they didn't have locks on the doors, so they were just sort of hanging open. Some of them didn't have running water, so we made sure they all had running water. Some of them didn't drain water properly, so you would have pools of water just in the middle of the bathroom, which made it even worse shape. And we also did things like we installed disposal containers for sanitary pads in female washrooms. So let me show you a couple pictures here. This is Al Hussein School. This was the washroom in a primary school when we first entered it. So it just wasn't usable. And this is pretty typical of a lot of the washrooms we had in this project. In this situation, many students just didn't use the washroom. They chose to use just the outside in the school courtyard or beside the washroom. And as you can imagine, that really made it an uninviting environment. It stunk. It just wasn't a good place to be in. After the work we did, this is what it looks like now. Next school. I think the problem in this washroom is fairly obvious. That door you see is entrance to the washroom, and where that child is trying to reach, that's the water source. That's where they could wash their hands. It simply wasn't appropriate for the smallest or shortest students in that school. And there was no lights in the washroom. It just wasn't a good situation. So what we did is we raised the platform so we could access it. You can tell we cleaned up the outside, made it a lot nicer. We installed lights in there. We fixed the door. This school. This is just the before photo, but what I really want to show you about this school is this. So in a lot of these schools, there's children who are handicapped, who are in wheelchairs. If there's no ramps, and ramps are not common, you can't use the washroom. So we installed ramps in schools, and on this picture on the left, you can see the bar to help students sit down. Alberg. I like this story. So this is an elementary school. This is just sort of the outskirts of it. The issue and to your left, if you're looking at the picture, to your left of the picture, this is, there was a little playground there. This is where kids could go outside during the recesses or this kind of thing. Residents surrounding the area had horses and other animals that would routinely wander onto the school grounds, which is dangerous. You can't have little kids running around where there's big animals walking around. It got so bad that they just had to stop using the outside area. So we built a wall to keep the animals out so the children could play. We also built this playground here, which was kind of cool. Almazar Primary. Yeah, just kind of whitewash, not a great inviting environment. So what we did here is we painted, we retiled, just made it more exciting to be in, I guess. And here's a school. This is the same school that I showed you that ramp. This is just an example of a classroom that we fixed up. This was a classroom that was in disrepair. So we cleaned it up, we painted, we installed lights, just made it a usable classroom. So in addition to the physical concerns, there was also a lot of concerns about social environment, which also contributed to huge absenteeism and just made the school environment not that inviting. At the beginning of the project, among boys, there was as many as, or on average rather, of 19 cases of violence a month that were considered serious enough to be formally reported through the school's reporting system. Among girls, this was as high as 10 incidents a month. And to compound that issue, less than 40% of school staff and administrators, people whose job it was to address these issues, were aware of how to provide proper support in these areas. So this is the second prong of the project. These were addressed by providing, well, the idea was to provide training and other types of support to school staff so they'd be able to better address the psychosocial needs, issues of violence and how to address that and other things, hygiene and gender-based needs. We had a lot of success in this. Less than 40% at the beginning of this project teachers knew how to address this. Now we have 90% of female and male school staff not only saying they know how to address this, but actively addressing and actively promoting issues around psychosocial issues, gender equality issues, hygiene, environmental lessons. And these are things that came from the project support over this 4-year period. I mean, 4 years is a long time, but it's not that long. I'm still very blown away that we had such great success there. So for the rest of this presentation, I want to talk about what made this project successful. I mean, personally, I think it was a very successful project. And, I think a large part of this has been the ability of the project to adapt. In humanitarian assistance, in international development, we go at things we do our assessments, we have a plan, and we carry out that plan. Now, in a good situation, you're constantly monitoring and you're learning and you're changing your plan as new challenges come up. This is hard to do. It doesn't always happen well. In regular life, same thing. We have we see a problem, we plan to address it, we figure out our way to address it, and we go forward. But if there's a hiccup and it doesn't work, we don't always pivot. I think we did that in this project, though. At the beginning of the project, things weren't going well. The most significant indicator of that is we had these school staff trainings where we were trying to train teachers in the first implementation year of this project on a number of the issues I mentioned. Only about a third of the school staff we invited showed up. So our staff on the ground, who were incredible, by the way, were able to analyze this and were able to figure out ways to address this. What I think, and this is a view that I think a number of people who are involved in this project share, is that one of the most important aspects that contributed to the success of this project, I mean, we had the construction, or the rehabilitation, but what really made this whole thing come together was this small school grant activity we had. This activity is initially, it was just part of our environmental training activities. Uh, the idea was that, we'd provide training on improving your environment. So we do construction, and then students would be given a little money to plant a garden to help beautify their environment a little bit. And we provide a little money and a little support for this. However, in some schools, a very, very small minority at the beginning, were also starting to use this support to do other things in their schools. In girls' schools in particular, especially at the beginning of the project, we were seeing growing evidence that some students were finding ways to use these initiatives to challenge some fairly ingrained gender expectations and negative norms that were in their communities and in their schools. At the same time that we were just realizing this was happening, in what we just started later to refer to as early adopter schools, we ran into a fairly major roadblock with the project. Remember how I said earlier that only about a third of staff were coming to our trainings? Well, we had started the process of revising our training manual with the goal of making it a little more interesting and applicable for teachers. And as part of that revision, we wanted to specifically address issues of sexual harassment and gender equality in the schools. We did this because as we were talking to teachers and even students, they were telling us that this was an issue they were facing, and this is an issue that they wanted more support to address. So we did this, and part of the process is that you write these manuals and you have to submit it to the Ministry of Education. So we followed this process and we waited. And we waited a long time. Eventually, the manual was rejected because of that specific inclusion. Those issues were lived real issues for people in the schools, but at the higher levels, they weren't as comfortable addressing those issues. That situation actually lasted for nearly 12 months. So we were only able to start the training in the second year of the project. So we have 1 year of training, one complete gap, and then we had the last year of the project that we just finished. This was a major problem. I mean, we didn't know it was going to last 12 months, but pretty soon we realized it was going to take a lot longer to get that manual approved than we initially expected. This was a major problem because key to how we envisioned this project to be sustainable, that these changes would actually last beyond the 4 years that we were there, was this idea that we would provide training to people in the ministry level, the district level, this sort of like more stable roles who are then responsible for the teachers. They then would go and train the teachers who would use the lessons they learn to support their students in, with stronger capacities in psychosocial support, gender equality, environment. And, as teachers change, that knowledge should stay at the district and ministry level. So this was our idea. But with this gap, we obviously had to abandon that approach, or at least temporarily put it on hold. So we revised. Instead of focusing on training, our staff refocused on individual schools. Our staff started going to every single school twice a month, and this is 75 schools. This is a lot of work. A lot more work than these trainings. It took up, and these aren't close schools either. Some of these would be hours drive. To work directly with teachers and principals. What we decided to do is we'd ask teachers and principals, tell us your concerns, tell us the issues, and then we sort of more of a dialogue approach to the training, and then we'd provide pointers and ways to address this. The other thing we wanted to do with these on-site support visits is provide coaching to help guide all the schools through this grant activity. We called them school initiatives. And the idea is we opened it up. It was no longer just about environment. It was about everything we were working on. Some of these schools needed a bit of support. Others really didn't. But we saw some pretty amazing results, I think. This is how our school, secondary school. In this school, this is a pretty conservative this school is located in a pretty conservative neighborhood of Jordan. gender norms, gender expectations, they're pretty ingrained in the schools, or in the communities rather. And one of the gender norms that girls have to face or are restricted by is that the idea that girls can become leaders is, at least at this age, is it's not as they're not, it's not expected, and it's not easy for them. But so what they did is they started a volunteering campaign. They got uniforms with support from the project, and the girls themselves were responsible for going to local leaders in the community, in mosques, community centers, stores, and offering their services to clean. So you see one girl cleaning a carpet there. This is, in one way, this is just sort of an activity where, they're improving their community and they're engaging their community. But what we started to hear is community leaders who initially would be very wary of an international NGO coming in and trying to do, we're going to do a campaign on gender equality. We're going to empower girls. But with this activity, they saw with their own eyes the leadership that was being exhibited by these students, fairly young students. They saw them completely organizing this activity, developing schedules, communicating with them, saying, this is what we want to do, and following through with it. And in that way, we started to see a bit of a, paradigm shift in just the way they viewed them. And this was a very empowering activity, both for these girls, but also as the community members started to see them in a different light. Another one, same school. Another issue within this school is there was a fair bit of violence within the school among students. It can be uncomfortable to just talk about this in many contexts. I mean, I think in Canada too. These are uncomfortable topics, addressing the reasons for violence. So what they did is they started a musical band. They got instruments and they wrote songs about violence and some of the reasons people did violence. They did song urging cooperation, nonviolence, and they also invited community members to hear their shows to address some of the issues of violence in the larger community. And it was a way to sort of they worked together, they organized these activities, they also just had fun with it. But it was a powerful way to convey some potentially sensitive messages. Here's another activity. This is an elementary school. Another activity that often, sorry, my computer technical difficulties. Another issue that is often limited for girls in these communities is painting. Oh, there we go. Is painting. It's just not something that is expected. It's very strict, boys do these professions or are going to do these professions, and women are going to do these professions. This is one that typically is dominated by men and boys, I guess. So they painted their schoolyard. This was a courtyard that we rehabilitated through the physical part of the project, but they painted it to make it really inviting. They put messages on the walls, they colored bright colors that are inviting, and they just had fun with it. So they were able to do this and take part in an activity that they traditionally can't take part in. But the other cool thing is this was the older students in the school that were doing this. They were able to act as a bit of role models to show younger students that, hey, if I wanted, that's something I could do too. Here's another interesting one. These students, and with the support of their teachers, started a drama and theater club. Within this community, one of the issues they were facing is that there was too many, I guess, instances of domestic violence in the school. Students were exposed to this. Some of them experienced it. And they wanted a way to talk about that and address it in a safe way. So they created plays. They created fictional characters. And they put these plays on for their peers and for the wider community. They perform plays talking about other things too, renouncing violence, instead of fighting, resorting to dialogue and tolerance of one another. Um, and what these plays did is they again gave this in this school. It was both girls and boys, but it gave them a way to work together, to plan something, to execute it, but also people started talking about them. It's fictional, but then they start applying it to their life. And we did start to see reductions in violence because of this. Violence was a key topic that came up a lot in this project. In this initiative, school staff, they were looking for, they knew kids were fighting, but they didn't know why. They had their ideas, of course, but they wanted to know why. And they also felt that many students needed an outlet to talk about this, but they just weren't comfortable talking about that directly to their teachers or their peers. It needed to be a little more anonymous, or done in a different way. So they installed chalkboards throughout the courtyard in different places, some more discreet than others, and just left out chalks so students could write down things that worried them, their concerns, their fears. And this was a way that they could share. They had an outlet, and then school staff could take these and they could address them in a non-threatening, more general way. And then again, this was another really successful activity. It seems simple, it's just chalkboards, but it had a really cool impact. As time went on, we began to see that these initiatives got a little, well, I don't know if advanced is the right word, but there was a lot more. This is a dominoes activity. Aljuba Primary School for Boys. Again, high rates of violence. When they talk to boys in this school, often the response is, well, I need to look tough. I need to be a man. So if I'm to show that, I need to fight. I need to, punch. So in addition to sort of trying to address this directly, they wanted to find a creative way to teach patience, teach long-term thinking, but also push the idea that, for everything you do, there is another reaction, which then has another reaction, has a dominoes effect. So they created Dominoes Club, where they talked about these issues, and then students created very cool dominoes creations. A similar activity is chess. In this school, they started a chess club with a similar purpose, to try to teach patience, self-control, and the idea that within chess you have to think, multiple moves ahead. And this is what they were trying to teach, and they made that connection as they taught this game. So, and then again, as the project went further and further, we started to see teachers and school staff gain a better understanding of the two components of this project. Remember, the first component was we were rehabilitating things, we were fixing things. In this school, this courtyard, it looks nothing like this picture. It was just rubble with a tree, not this tree, but it was covered in rubbish, and it was unusable. So we rehabilitated it. And through discussions with the school staff, we decided they wanted to create an outdoor classroom. We put a sun cover over top. The students did those drawings and paintings you can see on the side there, just to make it more of an inviting and exciting space. And we put the palm tree in the center was part of an environmental activity where students were given the responsibility to keep that tree alive. So they had to maintain it. And the other thing that happened is through the initiative, teachers were starting to see the idea of teaching things more creatively. So they did and the effect of that. So they started doing fun games in this garden space. In this picture, you can see them all dressed up with teeth because they're doing a hygiene activity. Here's another one where they're doing math with balls outside, just to make it more interesting and more engaging. All right, so another poll question for you. When you were in high school or elementary school, either one, what were sort of the classes predominantly like? Was it lectures, individual work, group work, or learning through play, both, something else? Lectures and individual work is the big one. Both is the next big one. Yeah, okay. I think that's a pretty common experience. It certainly is in Jordan. But through a lot of these initiatives, there really was a turning point among a lot of school staff and teachers, principals, realizing how effective learning through play, through project, through group can really be, and how exciting it can be for students. In this school, so they had regular English classes in this school, but what they decided to do for some students is they created a broadcast club. So in this club, students, they did their regular English learning, but they were also responsible for doing school broadcasts and other sort of events where they had to prevent news stories. They had to write them and say them over the school broadcast system as a way to not only practice their English, but practice or exercise their leadership skills, their organization skills, their planning skills. This was a really cool one, I think. In another example, this one was, they stayed with the lecture style, but what they did is, this is a garden that an exterior space that we rehabilitated. And they thought it would just be more interesting for students to teach some of the classes out here in a brightly lit green space. So here you can see their chairs are tires. Here's another photo. The walls have been painted. This painting's all been done by students. And then the project rehabilitated the space to make it nice and comfortable. And they did some counseling sessions out there. They did science classes. And the idea was that by simply moving the lecture into a more interesting space, it would lead to more engagement. Fine. One more initiative that I want to share with you. And this is something that we really started seeing in various forms near the end of the project. In this example, the project, we rehabilitated the classroom that was in extreme disrepair, to the point that it was just completely unusable. It was just an empty room with, I don't know, just you couldn't go in it. So the project rehabilitated it, and once the classroom was in a good shape, and school staff started discussing how best to use the space. I think a lot of the influence for their discussions was coming from their observations of successes from past initiatives. And one other thing that we are doing with this project is that every year schools are doing initiatives, and we would bring these principals together, or the principals of these schools together once a year, to talk about their initiatives, to share success stories, say, look, we did this. Oh, that's a great idea. Why didn't I try that? So this way, even though these are 75 separate schools, they're all learning from each other and building on each other's successes. So what they did is they created, what was it called? So they called this room a Talon Room. Through this initiative part of the project, we helped them purchase instruments, art supplies, and this was just a space that students could go to express themselves, to try out different interests. Teachers were there to provide support as needed, but a lot of this was teaching that was done student to student. So just give me a sec here, and I'm going to share a video with you. It's about a short video. How do I do this?
I guess playing on guitar. It's my favorite thing.
The idea was difficult for some parents, but step by step things have changed. The children became so enthusiastic. They are more motivated. They have shown the achievements of the Talent Room.
I was afraid of doing the things that I want to do, but my parents helped me a lot, and my family and my friends too, some of my teachers. So when I told my friends that I can play guitar or I can act on stage, so they said like, "Oh my God, Rina, are you sure that you can do this?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." And they told me that, "Okay, play for us on your guitar." And when I played for them, they said like, "You're doing a lot of great things," and they told me that I'm awesome. So I felt like more self-confident, and I felt that I did something very great in my life.
Okay, let me just share my screen once more. Sorry, one sec. There we go. I think that's it. Okay, so, earlier in this presentation, I said how the plan for the sustainability of this project was through training district and ministry level staff within the education department. And the idea is once we train that group, they provide training to teachers who then, once they learn these ideas, psychosocial support, gender equality, environment, they would then be able to better respond and support students. In my view, that's not what happened here. Rather, we provided key lessons and support to students, teachers, principals. And those lessons were primarily taken up at the grass level. Instead of top down, we went bottom up. Students and teachers turned these lessons and activities into all sorts of things that, I don't think we really imagined. We provided the framework and sort of the tools, but a lot of these ideas came straight from the students, the teachers. And they challenged issues. Some of these, like that volunteer activity I told you about at the beginning, it doesn't seem like much, but it was challenging some pretty ingrained gender equality issues that as an international NGO, we would have really struggled to challenge. In fact, we couldn't. Our manual was rejected. In the schools where these initiatives and activities are happening, there really is an energy. In the Jordanian school system, and as I think we got from that poll too, mutual learning between students and teachers isn't really that common. The common model is, the teacher has something to teach and the student has something to learn. Which there's a place for that, and that's still important. But through these initiatives, things got a lot more fluid, with teachers and students interacting in ways that they just don't do in regular teaching environments. I mean, to do these initiatives, students had ideas, teachers had ideas, they worked together, they created these things. And there's an excitement there. The students get excited, it makes the teachers excited. The teachers get excited, it makes the students get re-excited. It re-motivates them. And, you know, we've also seen just incredible leadership qualities coming out of these students, a level of energy and pride. And younger students too are seeing their older peers take part in these activities, and that's motivating them too. They want to take pride in their school. They want to do these initiatives. Um, One last example. What makes me think that this has been a success? I mean, we have our indicators that I told you about, but the students, the teachers, they want to keep doing these things. In a number of schools, we've seen them start to do income generation activities. A number of schools, they've started growing mushrooms on the school grounds that are then sold at lunch hour. And the point of this is to keep bringing in money so they can keep doing these initiatives. That, I think, speaks volumes to this project. So that's my presentation. I'm interested to hear from all of you. As I said, I'm still trying to wrap my head around a little bit about this project, but I'm curious, why do you think this grassroots approach worked so well? Or any other comments or observations of what I talked about? So yeah, I'll turn it back over to you, Grace, I guess.
Great, thanks, Tyler. That was really interesting to hear all the ways that these projects really took off. There's just a reminder on the screen. If you want to ask Tyler any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. So the screen is showing there where the Q&A box is. You can go and put it in there and ask any questions. Just while you're doing that, Tyler, you spoke quite a bit about how some of the student-led projects or the school-driven initiatives address gender equality in ways that you may not have been able to foresee. Could you speak more about that and how the effects of these projects and how they're addressing gender equality in Jordan?
Yeah, well, you know, it's hard to give one straight answer to that, just because this, in many ways, this was 75 mini projects in one project. In every single school, they address things differently. I think one of the things we found is that, you know, it wasn't really about us coming and saying, here is, you know, gender equality is an issue that you need to address. The students, the teachers, they knew this. And they had far better ideas of how to address these issues than we did. So really, I think the key, at least in this situation, was we simply, I mean, sometimes they needed the vocabulary and some extra tools, but we just sort of provided them with the tools and, you know, the funds too, because sometimes to do some of these activities, like the volunteering one or the painting one, but it didn't take much, like some paint or a cost of uniforms. And through that, I think really after that, we just left it to the students. And I don't know, I think they did a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, someone's put a comment in that it's a grassroots approach, that when people have ownership in what's happening, they have a commitment to see it go through. There is someone who's asking if there was any backlash from parents or the community to some of the changes or any of the projects.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, that video, I think, alluded a little bit to that. I think a lot of these activities were fairly neutral. The training activity, the painting activity, I mean, they're challenging things, but they're also not necessarily perceived as challenging things. It's just like, oh, well, you know, my kid is painting the schoolyard. It's a little bit weird, but whatever. But it can have an impact on others too. So it was kind of covert, I guess. But I think one of the areas where, so that we didn't have as much really much backlash, maybe a little bit of comments, but nothing really. Where parents especially did sometimes get nervous a little bit was with this sort of change in it wasn't a complete change, but this transition to more, I guess, interactive learning and that Talon Room, for example. But for the most part, I think people came around and just got really, I think it was also just the students were so excited about it. It was hard to be too wary of it, I guess. But yeah, no, overall, we didn't really have a ton, which was really great. Though I think we didn't get to there, but I do think that if we as an NGO had been the ones completely pushing it, then there would have been a lot more backlash. I think the key there was, again, that it was such a grassroots approach, and that all of these messages were coming from people within their community who knew how to speak the language, the approach, how to do it in a socially, contextually appropriate way. I think that was also a big key. Yeah.
That's great. We have another question here. I think maybe it refers to when you were speaking earlier about some of the rehabilitation work.
Yeah.
They're just wondering who did the rehabilitation and how did you decide how it would be changed?
So a couple steps. We, in consultation with the Ministry of Education, right at the beginning of the project, we compiled a list of schools in those 3 districts, and those just were the districts we were allowed to work. We'd been assigned to work in, of schools that needed repairs. I think there was something like 200 or 300 schools, possibly. We had money for 75 schools. So from there, we developed sort of a criteria of what was the most important things that we needed to address. Washrooms that weren't accessible was one of them. Other issues, like we just sort of looked at like what were the worst of those schools, and we had a engineering staff. We had an engineering department as part of our staff who went out and did these assessments and said, okay, well, structural issues here. This school has to be part of it. Things like that. And then in terms of deciding on what to do, that was consultations with principals of each school, with the district level district education, and then also students too. So, for example, the addition of the waste bucket for sanitary pads, that actually came because every year what we did is we went to students too and said, hey, what would be a good addition to the school? And there was like, just like a little metal, just rubbish box would be great. So things like that. So it was that consultation at the beginning, but then ongoing consultation throughout the whole project.
That's great. I really like that approach of listening to the students as well as officials. Just someone's commenting that they were recently in Jordan and there were abandoned tires everywhere. So I think it's a really creative idea to bring them in for the students to sit in. So thanks for that comment.
That's cool. Yeah.
Oh, you have someone here who's very familiar with CLWR. Said
cool.
They actually visited Jordan in 2018.
Nice.
They're just wondering, now that the official timeline for the project has passed, what do you see as the future or next steps for these schools in Jordan?
That's a good question. Well, for the rehabilitation, I mean, I get this is a sustainability question, I guess. For the rehabilitation, just purely from a construction point of view, when we did this work, we hired contractors. Every year we would put out a bid and bring in new contractors, and we ensured that they all have a 2-year warranty to, so if anything falls apart and all that, they're going to come and fix it free of charge. But I think but in terms of some of the lessons that we taught and some of these initiatives, I have a lot of hope that they're going to keep going. I talked about the mushroom growing activity, and we've seen a lot of activities like that too, where there is a real desire to keep these things going. And like I said, we provided the tools and we provided the funds, but most of this came from the schools themselves. So there's no reason why this can't keep happening, even though the project is officially done. I mean, I'd love to see in, a year or two what happened, but I have quite a lot of confidence that we'll continue to see these changes happening long after we're gone.
Okay. Someone has a question around gender equality. They're wondering, considering the often traditional or more specific roles for men and women and boys and girls in Jordanian society, they're wondering your opinion on how likely it is that any changes or learnings that happen about gender equality for girls will stick or make a difference going forward.
You know what? Oh, yeah, it probably won't stick everywhere. But I really do think it's going to stick in a lot of these situations. It will, just because the students, especially the female students, they took part in some really cool activities, and they were the ones who did this. I mean, they were the ones who they showed us. They were the ones who took control. They planned these activities. They challenged these gender norms themselves. This didn't come from us. This came from them. So I'm kind of repeating myself over and over there, but I think that's sort of the key to all of this, because these changes are coming from the students themselves. I don't see any reason why they would disappear, because it's not like we're there saying, you need to be equal. It's like, no, it's these students saying, no, you know what? We want to be treated equally. And so I don't know. I mean, yeah, not everywhere is going to be the same, but I do think that we will see some longer lasting changes, especially with this, the teachers too, because I think the teachers were really getting excited about what they were seeing and the potentials they were seeing. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't continue to do that.
Yeah, change begins somewhere, right?
No, exactly.
all the people participating in the program got a real taste for those leadership opportunities and everything. So it's a good beginning. Someone else is commenting that they about giving children the freedom to express themselves. So that's true. Just going on here. Oh, someone has a question about the work that was done. Maybe some of the more physical work. It says, they're wondering about if the work was done using local materials and local tradespeople.
Yeah, all local. So the way we did it is, I mean, so we had 75 schools to work on. We broke them into 3 packages. The work was done once. So we ended up doing the work over 3 years. So we had a 17, 2018, and 2019 package. Every single year we would do a call, and I think we had 3 contractors each year who were responsible. And this was all local contractors who bid. Obviously we worked with, good bids, but also ones that had very good track records in the past. And also we monitored the work daily. Actually, our staff were just monitoring what they were doing. But yeah, everything was done locally.
Great. Yeah, someone's asking, they're wondering how they can support the students that you were working with, or how as an educator they could support.
I guess, I mean, you can, I guess it depends on where you are, but I mean, there's always the options to, check out Canadian Lutheran World Relief's website or MCI's website. And there's many ways to support that work and other work that we're continuing to do. Okay,
and just to follow up on that, the follow-up email that goes out after this webinar will have a link to CLWR's website. Mm-hmm. Someone else, I've got a few more questions popping up here.
Yeah. No worries.
Rapid fire, we got a few minutes left. Some people are asking, saying they were surprised some of the education was done in English. Are all the schools English? Or are the education done completely in English?
Can you clarify that? It wasn't done in English. It was done, the education was all done in Arabic.
I think maybe one of the photos had a table sign with some English words. Maybe it wasn't.
Could be. A lot of these schools have English classes. I mean, English is a common subject in most of these schools, so that could be what it was.
Yeah.
Because like for that broadcast activity, for example, I talked about, I mean, a lot of, so English language learning is fairly common and sought after, so.
Okay. Someone else has a question. If the project hasn't been going long enough to allow you to get a sense or be able to evaluate whether there's maybe a higher rate of interest in post-secondary education or other sort of follow-on effects of the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no idea. That would be a really good thing or interesting thing to track, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're just getting another question about advocacy. People are asking how can they advocate for the children and help build confidence and support this work. So I think maybe we'll make sure to send out that link after.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments on
that? Nothing particularly. I think there's lots of great resources on both of our websites. So I think that'd be a great place to check out.
Okay. Well, I'm conscious of the fact that we're almost done here. So I just want to say thanks, Tyler, for sharing. It was really interesting. In particular, I really enjoyed the video, the chance to see the students live. It's always nice. Photos are really great too. So that was really great. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for those excellent questions. And if you enjoyed this presentation, you can join us on September 17th for our next Local Brews. We're going to take a break over summer with CUSO International, and they're going to be sharing about an exciting program they have for girls and young women in Ethiopia. So if you sign up for our e-newsletter, you'll receive an email later on with information on how to register for that event, or you can just watch our social media for more information. Just a quick note, you'll get a short survey about the event tonight in your email. If you want to fill it out and share your feedback with us, we would really appreciate it. Please put some pluses in the chat if you enjoyed tonight's talk, and that's going to be our applause for Tyler. So thanks so much, Tyler, and everyone for attending. Just want to say good night and thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.